Okay.
I spent the best part of a week tracing down every person that everybody told me to talk to. And there was no way on earth that you could find out who was responsible and who could make the decision. Not possible. And so finally we came to the decision that we were going to have to tell that fellow he couldn't come. And we had all of our people just praying. But we didn't want to do it. And so we told the person in Florida that we were going to have to contact the fellow and tell him he couldn't come. We'd done everything we could do. But there was a lot of praying going on. And this fellow looked out, he told us he looked out the window and he saw this fellow walking up. And he says, I just saw it sunk through the floor. He said the guy opened the door and he came in and just started apologizing. And he said, I'm just so sorry. He said, I know I have committed to come. But he said, I've had a conflict. There's no way I could come. Is there any way that you could let me off and give me my registration fee back?
That's funny.
So we gave him his registration fee back, and we made a decision that we would never schedule another conference in a place that we couldn't invite anybody that wanted to come. And we told the director, which he was very disappointed because we were his time off, you know, and he always wanted us. So we found places that we could go. And down there, they had a full kitchen and food service, and all we had to do was tell them how many people they prepared the meals. We just paid the fee. But these other places, we had to do our own cooking. And I went to this lady at the cafeteria at the mill, and I would say, I need 175 for Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday noon, Saturday night, Sunday breakfast, and Sunday noon. And she'd take her crew with her machines that could cut up the salads and everything. And she'd put each meal in 2 boxes about the size of a file box, maybe 3. We'd bring them down and put them in the walk-in freezer or refrigerator. And we'd give the students, and we would put about 4 students on each meal, give them the boxes, and she'd written the instructions, and we'd say, your responsibility to fix the meal. And so they would fix the meal, but it was trouble. And about 2 years later, this guy at the FFA camp called us and said, you can bring your group back now. He said, I can take anybody that comes. He said, they're not advertising it, but he said, the rule's been changed. Our group had the first integrated student chapter in any university in Mississippi in those days. And the person, the student, and these are student-led groups, the student who did that ended up in his later life as being the person who broke the massacre of over 2 million people in southern Sudan.
Wow.
He was a missionary, and he also had a PhD in peacemaking and conflict resolution. And if you would look on the February the 7th, I think it is, 1999 copy of the Washington Post, on the front page you'd see a picture of black Sudanese jumping and hollering and celebrating with one white guy there. And if you opened up the center page, there'd be 2 full things of color pages of this peace negotiation. And he's the only non-Sudanese involved. But he was later then, you ever heard of World Vision? He was, after that, he was hired by World Vision, made a vice president in charge of peacemaking and conflict resolution around the world. And he's recently retired. But at any rate, he was the student who formed that chapter. His father was editor of the newspaper in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. This organization today is probably the most fully integrated student work in America, you'll find 100% blacks and 100% white. About 15 to 20% of this organization's staff are African American. Some of the department heads are African American. They started groups on the universities here in Atlanta. But I guess that I never saw any. I can't identify any conflict in the factories, except the fact they were segregated.
Right.
I'm sure those people who were segregated would have a different story to tell. I remember the most interesting cultural picture I saw if I wanted to write a cartoon. This was at Georgia Dutton Carter's Mill. We had hired there lots of people that came through the English as a second language school in Clarkston. And we would get the Bosnians, the Serbs, the Russians, and the various ones and another. So we ended up with lots of blacks and Muslims and Christians and radical Christians, and we were all Christians and would support evangelism and all that, but we'd have sometimes more problems with the Christians, that they try to read their Bible and witness to the Muslims, and we'd nearly have a war in the middle of the factory. You could have everything in a big factory that you could have in a city, but anyhow, one scene that I'll never forget was a redneck. It was an African American with a T-shirt with a big picture here of Malcolm X, sitting on a smoking stool right beside a redneck of the most extreme order, with a big picture here of a Confederate flag, just sitting there talking to each other. In the plant, they would focus on their work and themselves. If I had walked over and pointed that out to them, there'd been problems.
Right.
But as long as it wasn't a problem for them who they were, it was all right. Now we didn't allow supervisors to curse. We'd fire them. If you do that, they don't curse.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I remember the old man, the guy that had control and interest of the duck mill. He saw an African American with a T-shirt on that said, "I am a sex devil." And he looked at it and turned to the supervisor and said, "Fire him now, send him out." That was the end of it. He just wasn't going to have it.
Right.
But the racial problem was the fact that we discriminated against the race. And I'm thankful that we took our steps a few years before the government took theirs. But that's how it happened. It wasn't anything that I thought and said, this is bad, we've got to do something about it. It was, we've got to fill this job.
Right.
Who's the most qualified? And so we and I found that it was not in myself, my supervisor, or my workers to stand against somebody's advancement if they were responsible for it. If they were in the culture that did it, they were in that culture. But if they were personally responsible, they wouldn't do it.
Right. Okay. Were female workers treated differently at the mill?
Yes, originally. And No, in the latter years.
How so? How were they treated differently?
In the early years, only men would be weaving and running machines, and women would be doing the lighter work. Of course, later on, the heavier work was not as heavy, but I don't remember the change there. I just remember probably before I got there, and when women would be doing the weaving or doing whatever men did, they were paid the same thing men would. The line would be piece rate. They'd be paid by the pick or by the production rate. But it was an hour rate. There was no difference in pay. Now, if there was a job category that was easier for women to do, and they seemed to head toward that job category, I can't say that job category didn't end up with a lower rate. But if they both did the same job, it was the same pay.
So the difference was mainly in workload?
And culture, and it changed. I can remember trying to get women to be mechanics. And in the spinning room, I ended up with 2 women that were overhaulers, which was a mechanic job, and did excellent and stayed on the job. Most of the time, I would train them and they would quit. Also, in supervision, I would try to put women in supervision. Try to put blacks in supervision, and some blacks, but many of them didn't want it. And the women, I never got a woman to stay. But there were some blacks that stayed in both Scottdale and Georgia Dock.
Okay. As far as the mill closing, what was the process from the beginning when you found out that you were facing closure up until the doors actually closed?
Well, we probably lost money in the last 5 or 6 years, every year but one. So we could see the decline in profits. I think it was in 1980 or 81, we wanted to go into a bonding fabric. It's the one you see in the expensive restaurant that kind of has a pebbly look. It doesn't look like a plain weave. It's kind of pebbly. The napkins and the tablecloths and the very highest things. It's called mummy cloth. I think it's a cloth that they found found the weave in mummies in Egypt. I don't know, but it's called mummy cloth. And it takes a more complicated loom. It takes a loom with a control mechanism, something like a player piano, to weave it. And I was told to set up about 40 looms that could weave it at the highest efficiency and the lowest cost, because we were struggling then to survive. And I remember getting Robert Smith, and he set out an overhaul program. We got these looms where they were running 92% with 2 or 3% off quality, and it was costing us 91 cents, and we were selling it for 93 cents. I think we had 2 cents a yard in it, and we were kind of pleased with that. We were making about $12, $13 a week per loom. And about 5 or 6 months after that, a ship docked in New York that had a big load of that fabric from somewhere in the Orient, and they were selling it for, I think, 57 cents a yard. And we had done the best we could, and we were selling it at 2 cents. And you pretty well see the writing on the wall. We had, starting in 1959, we had modernized every plant with the latest, every room with the latest quality, the highest and most efficient machinery. We spent several millions of dollars over 1959 through the 1960s. And I say we've gone several years with low profits or no profits and actually losses. But when you run a factory, you charge the depreciation of machinery against your expenses, but you're not spending the cash. You're using up the machine, and at some later point you're going to have to buy a new machine, but you can write that off as depreciation each year. So while we were losing money, we were not necessarily losing that much beyond our depreciation, not the cash. We knew we couldn't survive forever, but we were not, it was a cash loss. But it got to be a cash loss. And we met in November of '81, myself and my boss, Hansford Sams, and Milton Scott, the fellow that owned the duck mill, who by that time, he did not want any people in the family to criticize the way we'd run the mill, and we could see things were going the wrong direction. And his mill was making a specialty, making conveyor belting, and they had designed a new type of fabric and new type of conveyor belting, and they were making big profits, like 7%, like 7 cents on the dollar. And he said, I don't want anybody to criticize the way we've handled their stock and their investment. He said, I will offer to buy everybody's stock that our companies don't already own. Everybody that are outside the immediate family, and eventually bought everybody in the immediate family too, because it had gone down through 2 or 3 generations. And I pointed out to him, I said, if you own 80%, you can take their losses off of your profits. That's part of the law. It's one company and your losses merge into it. So anyway, he bought, and so he owned control, if not 100%. I'm not sure, but he definitely had control. And so he was in making the decision. In November, we looked at it and said, if it doesn't turn around by February, we've got to shut down. And so we began holding back on expenses and trying to get orders. But you can't run without a market. You can't run without a market that you can sell at a profit. And so I hadn't, but he had gone through the Great Depression and survived. He'd gone through 7 recessions and had survived. And we thought this might be another one, but it wasn't. It was a structural change in the economy. And nothing changed, and we met in his office, I think the 1st of February, and we made our reports of what the status was. And he said, is there anything new? Is there any way, any hope that we have? And we said, none on the horizon. And he said, well, do we have any option other than shut it down? And we both said no. And so he had come in a buggy from Decatur as a boy at age 6 and watched them build the mill. So his whole life was there. And his grandfather, and he had seen his grandfather. He was 8 when his grandfather died, but he lived in the memory of his grandfather. And so he said, well, shut it down. And he sat there and looked out the window towards Scottdale, and he turned to me as he watched his options to see what his next decision was. And he pointed towards Scottdale and he looked at me and he says, get my money out. So that was the shortest job description I'd ever had. And my boss sold off the inventory, and my job was to lay off the people, shut down the machinery, sell the machinery. My boss was involved in selling the machinery. Find somebody to chuck out the machinery and sweep the floor and keep insurance and a watchman on it and security, and that took from February till probably the end of May. And then we looked for a sale, and we got a sale from a company in Chattanooga that was going to convert it into a place to incubate new businesses. And the guy went bankrupt, and I resold the plant to the DeKalb Farmers Market, who then, after 7 or 8 years, tore the plant down because it was too expensive to maintain, and it had deteriorated to the point there had been vandalism in a building like that. People go in and steal the copper out and things like that. The roof leaks, and then the floors warp, and the building's gone. But that's how you liquidate a plant.
The long and the short of it. Were provisions made for laid-off employees?
We didn't have any money, and we could work the employees while we ran the product out. So it was probably the 1st or 2nd of February when we made the decision. So we decided to tell them immediately if any of them wanted to make decisions on their own. So I think within the next 4 days, I had meetings on each shift and told them, if I may, I've got over here, I think, what I said to them. No. This is the notice that we finally made. I talked to them personally, but that's the notice. That's exactly what was included in the notice, which we helped them get their unemployment claims, convert their insurance, provide them references for employment. But that meant 650 people had to get employment. I checked in the remaining textile mills in the immediate area, and there was 6 openings. And I told them that. And so here's what I told them. And this is another one of the things that I'm most pleased with what I was able to come up with. I think basically the Lord gave me wisdom, because I certainly was asking for it. But I said, most of you will not find textile jobs. There are 400 mills going down at the same time we're going down. And it got worse after that. It increased until there virtually, I know of one operating mill left. I'm sure there are more, but I used to know most of the mills in Georgia. There's one up in northwest Georgia, Tryon, making denim. And I can't name any others without researching it, among thousands. But I said, you all are mostly good employees. The main issue is absenteeism. Every employer's biggest struggle is people that don't come to work regular on time. I said, I can get 6 people jobs, and I said, over the period you'll be looking for a job, I can probably place 15 people. I'm not sure I can commit to placing any more than that. I said, many of you will get jobs through friends and family. You'll have friends and family working places that we've got a job. As you get jobs, you do the work like you've done for us, but be sure to do work to where your employer will see that you're a special employee like they would want. And keep your eyes on and your ears on. And when you hear of another opening in that business, go to your supervisor and say, that opening's come open. I know an employee from Georgia Duck that I think could fill it. And you all help each other. And if you can't find a job, you come back and put your name on a list at the company. And we will do what we can from people that call us. When we started, that list was that long, about 7 feet long. And some people decided it was time for them to retire. They were in their 60s anyway and didn't want to work anymore, owned their own house. They paid off their $4,000 house that they'd had for 20 years and 25 years. And I remember getting a call from a lady who was a personnel manager of a place on off of Covenant Highway, and she said, "I've hired 20 of your employees." She says, "I've not had a dud yet." She says, "I'll hire anybody you recommend that I have an opening for." The employees were doing the job to attract other people. I had a African-American lady come in, unkempt, hair in a mess, chewing snuff. "Mr. Scott, ain't nobody gonna give me no job." I said, "Well, I think you're right, if that's the way you're gonna ask them." I said, "You realize you came in here to me and you got a wad of snuff in your cheek? Your hair hadn't been combed and brushed. Your dress is a mess. And you're negative on every word you've said to me since you walked in my office." I said, "Let's look at it another way. How far did you go in school?" "4th grade. You got a 4th grade education?" She said, "Yes." I said, "You worked for Scottdale Mills for 15 years and have a near perfect attendance record?" "Yes." I said, "You learned our job in just a week or 10 days?" She said, "Yes." And I said, "You're 59 years old?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Let me show you something. That if you straighten yourself up and do what you can do to make a positive presentation." And I picked up the phone and called this lady. And I said, "How are my employees doing at work?" "Oh, fine, I'm just tickled to death." I said, "I have a person I want to recommend to you. I know you've got a job there that's putting price labels on merchandise. And I know this lady could do that job." I said, "She's got a 4th grade education. She worked for us faithfully for 15 years. Her attendance record is excellent. She's 59 years old, and I know you'd like somebody younger. But you and I have hired these young people come in." I said, "When you hire these youngsters that come in, what percentage of them are gone within 3 months?" And she said 50% or more. I said, "Well, we've seen 60 and 70% go." I said, "This lady will be with you for 5 years minimum if her health doesn't break, but she has no health problems now, and you would have no problem with her." And I wondered if you would give her a consideration. She said, "But Scott, I don't have an opening now." And we talked more. She didn't want to hire her. And we talked, and at the end she said, "Send her on over." And I said, "Thank you." And I called up and I said, "She told me to send you over for an appointment." I said, "Fix yourself up. Look like you're going to church. Get that wad of snuff out of your mouth. And see if she'll give you a job." She went over there and they gave her a job. Well, I would have people come, but the hard cases would come and where I could place them up. 2 years from the time we closed down and the workman's unemployment insurance got extended. And I think it started with I don't know how many months, but it went for at least 18 months. But 2 years after we shut down, I crossed the last name off of that list. Now, I can't say that everybody had a job because some of them retired. And we couldn't contact them, but they knew where we were. And if they wanted help, they came back there. But 24 months from the time we closed the door, I crossed the last list, the last name off the list of people that were asking us for help. And those are the only benefits we gave them.
It's more than a lot of people get, especially these days. How do you feel about your experience at the mill?
I enjoyed it. And as I look back over it, I realize that all the work I did and the factory did, we spun the thread from the bale of cotton, wove fabric average 4.5 feet wide, long enough to go from the North to the South Pole every year. 12,000. We spun the thread and wove 12,000 miles of fabric every year with 650 people. But I think what I think back on that's most significant is the ways that we were able to work with people. Those are the only thing that really lasts and has any value in my mind. I think of all the technical knowledge I have, there's no place to sell it or use it anymore. But those things that I did that last have to do with the way I helped to encourage people. I can remember we frequently would hire people on their first job out of prison. Somebody's got to do it or they're going to be right back in prison. We felt we should, and we had tough enough management that we thought we could handle anything and probably could. Once I looked around and saw that I had 6 murderers working for me. Almost never a problem. Then I realized one of them was a psychotic murderer. Then I had a problem. How do you fire a psychotic murderer? And we figured out how to do that to where he was pleased and we were pleased. But anyway, we worked through that. But at any rate, I never got a permanent employee from hiring prison release people. They would work for me until their parole ended, and then they'd evaporate the next day. But it was a contribution to the community.
Mm-hmm.
I think of those 2,000 to 4,000 people that we trained off the streets of Atlanta. 50% of them had jobs, and we would train them, then they'd go on to other places, we'd train more. Wasn't very expensive. We had a training director, an assistant training director, and then we would have an instructor for about every 4 people. And the things that last are things that are not that visible. I think of the scripture verse that says that Jesus said, "Lay not up yourselves treasures in heaven where moth or rust corrupt, and thieves break in and steal. But lay up yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust won't corrupt." And I thought of that verse as I stood there in about 1984 and watched them take sledgehammers and break up the spinning frames that I had arranged to when I put my first new department together, modernized the room, brand new equipment in 1960, and then in 1984 I saw them taking it out, breaking the cast iron with sledgehammers and dropping from the second floor into a truck, and it just splintered to pieces. And I thought, you know, those things that I thought was very important at the time really don't have any lasting value. And I actually saw that pile of scrap metal down in Highway 15 going west out of West Point, Georgia, near a little town called Quickly, I think. But anyway, as a pile of scrap iron with somebody holding it up there waiting for the price to go up. Just a mountain of scrap iron. And I thought, well, so much for things that I thought were really important. There's other things more important.
Right. Well, Mr. Scott, that concludes the questions that I've prepared for the interview.
Okay.
Is there anything more that you'd like to add?
No, but here's a history of Scottdale Mills that I put together when sociology groups would come and want to interview me to find out about the old company store and all that kind of stuff. And I explained why you had a company store when there was no other place to buy something.
Right.
When we got out of the company store, we wrote off the uncollected bills that we had billed employees could never collect it of $75,000.
Wow. Well, on behalf of the DeKalb History Center, I'd like